Good day. Today, I'm going to talk about, I forgot what I was going to talk about. I'm going to talk about continuing the modernization journey. And if you recall from my previous videos, I have a story about how I take an existing legacy Java application. Oh, I have a graphic. I'll show you that. I have taken an existing legacy Java application and how I modernize it, and how I libertize it, how I containerize it, and how I get into Kubernetes. And that particular demo, I migrated it to IBM Cloud Private. And so today I want to talk more about how do we continue the migration journey, because it's okay. I got an old application and I got it to a container, and that's nice. But then you say, well, Rob, what if I want to do more? What if I want to start making use of some of the modern technologies that are available in the cloud environments today? What if I want to make use of microservices, and I want to use Istio, and I want to do things like that? In other words, how can I take, let me switch screens again. How can I take this application, if you recall it, how can I take this classic application and turn it into something like this? Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's going to be in a couple of parts, because I'm going to focus more on the dev part in part one, and then we're going to do the ops part in part two, how we take what we've developed and move that into the cloud. So this is RoboBank 2020. So I'm really getting a lot of leg room out of my RoboBank demonstration. So you might say this application's 20 years in the making, because I wrote this thing back in 1997, if you recall. I wrote my original demo back in 1997. It looked like this. It ran on WebSphere. It was awesome. Okay, but now what I want to do is I want to take this application, which was it was a J2EE application, JSP, servlet, JDBC to a database, and I want to take the servlet part and the JSP part, and I want to do it with Node.js. I want to use a modern programming language, and then I want to start making use of microservices. Okay, so how can I take my business logic from 20 years ago and microservice it? That's important, and I think it's on the minds of a lot of developers today. And then how do I deploy that into the cloud and make use of a cloud infrastructure like you see on the screen here to leverage all that the cloud has to offer. Okay, so now as a quick recap, what I'm going to do here is we're going to look at my old application, and I'm just starting that right now. We're going to have a look at the old application, okay, just as a quick peek as a reminder. So that's coming up right now, and then we're going to see how we make use of it. There we go. So there it is. There's RoboBank 99, as you recall. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then please have a look at one of my previous videos where I talk about how to actually migrate this application in the first place. So this is the old RoboBank, and here are the servlets and the other business logic that's sitting there. And what the first thing I want to do is I want to say, okay, well, how do I take that business logic and how do I put a microservice front end around it and make it deployable to the cloud? And for a lot of people, that's the hard part, okay? Because if I want to use DevOps and DevOps tool chains and whatnot, there's a lot of scripting involved for those kinds of things, and what do I do with my existing business logic and things like that? And our cloud tooling really helps us along with that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to start introducing the topic of tool chain. So I'm going to go to the cloud. This is my cloud account. Welcome to it. And I'm going to log in here, and I'm going to go to DevOps. Okay. And then if I look at my tool chains here, this is our tool chain service, and I have a couple tool chains here, and I've got a couple other tool chains in another resource group here, and I want to build out this tool chain in order to be able to deploy stuff to the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this resource group here. I'm going to call it the default group. And now as a developer, I have code and I have an IDE. So in this case, I'm using RAD. Now to be modern, and use what the cool kids are using, all that kind of stuff, I want to look at using Visual Studio Code, right? So here are my projects here and things like that. So we'll get to that in a second. But the first thing I need to do is I need to generate a stub that will have all the scripts for me if that's available, and that's what I'm going to do. And for developers, it's a very straightforward process. Here I am. I'm logged into the IBM Cloud on the command line. Always with the command line with me. I can't help it. I just like working with the command line. And what I want to do is I want to say IBM Cloud dev create, if I remember correctly. And I go boom. Okay, and then it says, well, what do you want to build? Do you want to build a back-end service, or do you want to build a mobile client? And you go, well, okay, I want to build a back-end service. So I'm going to go like that. and it says, well, what do you want to build? What kind of backend service? And those are the ones that you have options to. So we see there's the Java microprofile, there's Java Spring for the Spring fans out there, and then Node, Python, and Swift. So those are the those are the cool ones for kids today. That's great. I'm a Java backend, Node front end kind of guy. So that's what we're going to be doing. And also, I have my RoboBank, which is Java code, and I want to turn that into microservices. So I'm going to select Java microprofile, and then I'm going to say microservice basics, and click number 2. And then the name for my application is I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it RoboTest. I know this isn't terribly original, but it's going to do something live for us. So I'm going to call it RoboTest 1, and then RoboTest August 3rd. I think today is today. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to put that into my default resource group, like so. And then I'm not going to add services. I'm not going to bind any Watson services or anything like that today. I'm just going to do something simple. And then this is interesting. So it says, well, Rob. It doesn't actually say Rob, but let's work with me here. It's Rob, what do you want to do with the stub that we're going to generate? And so I'm going to say, well, I want to use Kubernetes, and I want to deploy it automatically. And so I'm going to pick number 2. Okay, so I'm going to say IBM DevOps using Kubernetes containers. So I click number 2, and I hit enter, and then it says, and then I have a cluster that's called Toronto, so I'm going to put it in my Toronto cluster. And then I'm going to hit return. So now what it's doing is it's actually creating that application for me. It's going to create a tool chain in IBM Cloud that will set up to deploy this thing automatically for me. So the worry of a lot of developers is like, well, hello, what are all these scripts I got to write? What the heck is Jenkins? And what's Urban Code? And what are all these things that do DevOps for me? And how much do I have to learn? Well, as it turns out, with the cloud tooling that we have, you have to learn precious little as a developer in order to get things working. And we're going to walk through that as soon as it generates the application for us. So here it is. It says it's created the tool chain. So we're going to go over here back to my tool chains, and I'm going to click refresh, and hopefully it's going to show up. That's always kind of nice. Oh, there it is. There's RoboTest August 3rd, and it creates a few things for me. And then if we're going to continue on here, what it's going to do now is it's actually going to check in the code itself to the IBM Enterprise GitHub that we make available to our customers. Now, if I don't want to use that GitHub, I want to use my own GitHub or the public GitHub, then what I would say is I'd say no DevOps with manual deployment, and then it just generates the stub for me, and then I can go and check that in to whatever GitHub I want, and then I can build my tool chains to use that GitHub. Now, it does generate the scripts for me, so I can plug those into the individual elements of the tool chain still. So I don't have to let it develop a tool chain for me. I can do it that way. What I do is, or what I would do, is I would actually let it generate your stub into GitHub, and then copy the tool chain. And then so you don't have to worry about creating little bits of the tool chain, just use the one, and then change the targets from Kubernetes from whatever GitHub you want to use to things like that. So it's grinding through that right now. So what it's doing again is it's creating the tool chain, and then it's going to go and check into GitHub for me. And these are the 3 little chiclets that we see here. So there's Git for that thing. So I click on that. That should take me to the project itself. And so we can see that here's the template itself. In GitHub, and this is the one that we provide for our customers. And again, you don't have to use it if you don't want to, but there it is. And then what we have as well is that we have the actual pipeline that it's going to deploy on. So I'm going to click on that, and let's have a look there. So here we are. There's the build stage, and there's the deploy stage. So you can see it's already building the template. Okay, so now there's one trick to the deploy stage. So I'm going to configure the stage. Is that it even though I said Toronto, it has it in the wrong zone. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to put it into US East. Again, this is where Toronto, the data center, sits, but we're okay. Didn't take a breath there. Toronto and Montreal are in the US East zone, and then we're going to save that part of the tool chain. So now the stub that it's created for me, it's now building and it's deploying, and it's going to deploy that into the Toronto data center where my Kubernetes cluster is running. So you go, hey, that's pretty good. I didn't have to do a damn thing, or darn thing. Pardon me. I didn't have to do anything. As a developer, it created the tool chain for me. It's running and it's deploying. Okay, so I'm going to go back to here. So this is still thinking. And so what's going to happen here eventually is that we're going to it's going to clone the project out of GitHub for me, download the code, and then I can import that into my IDE. And so I'm going to go to my IDE, and that's exactly what I've done here. So I created a tool chain called Account Engine. All right, and I did exactly that. So if I come here and I go back to my tool chains, and I look here, it's in a different organization right now. It's here. This is my Account Engine tool chain. And you'll notice it just has a couple of steps. There's the GitHub portion, and this is the delivery pipeline. On my other ones, I still have the Web IDE, because let's say you're into using just Web IDEs these days, which some people are. I'm not going to make judgments, but we include the Orion Web IDE as well. You can tell I don't use it very much. I'm a on the ground kind of programmer. I want to use my IDE. I want to see my code, and I want to be able to check that into GitHub. I don't want to use everything that's out there for whatever reason. You know what it is first off, I like to have a copy of my code on my machine, because when all else fails, I still have my code somewhere. Another thing is that maybe I don't want to use a tool chain right away. If I'm working on a Node.js application, for example, and I got a button and I'm going to move it 3 pixels to the left, and I want to see how that looks. Do I really want to push that through a tool chain to see how a button's going to look 3 pixels to the left? No. So if I have it running locally, then I can very quickly unit test something like that before I actually push it through a tool chain. But anyway, for the people that want to use Web IDEs, there's the Web IDE. I don't use them. I use the IDEs on the ground. So I click here, and so there's my Account Engine. And look, and let's take a little tour of everything that's generated for me. So first off, it has generated me my build and deploy scripts. Okay, and again, so DevOps is DevOps, right? So this is the dev portion, and this is more or less the ops portion, more or less. I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit, but the idea is that I have a script that's going to build my stuff for me. Okay, and I don't have to worry about it. And I've got a script that's going to deploy my stuff for me in the environment that I choose out of the box. So I don't have to. And that's the thing, I see that too. I'm on the same journey that most of you developers are out there as well. I've got an old backlog of code, and I want to leverage it in this new world. And that's exactly what my RoboBank application does. And I don't want to have to worry about instantaneously learning how to use Jenkins and instantaneously learning how to use Urban Code. So what these plugins do, or what these stubs do, is it does it for me, and that's really nice. And so what do I do with the rest of this thing? Well, so first we have the build and the deploy scripts for us, so I don't have to worry about those. And now as I get more experienced with them, I can tweak them, and that's exactly what I did. And that's great. And so that's really nice too. I get the flexibility, but at least it works initially, right? And then over here as well, let me have a look here. Here's the chart. These are templates for actually doing a Helm deploy into our Kubernetes environment, which again is awesome. It's like I don't have to worry about how to build a Helm chart right away. So what this thing does, or what this tooling does, is it generates those stubs for me, and that's really nice. And there's even an Istio option. So we're really up with the times on the kinds of things that people want to do. And since I'm building microservices, I'm going to want Istio to manage them. So I'm actually making use of these YAML files that it generates. And then I added my own, because I have my own Istio gateway, and I need to my database needs to be able to, or I need to be able to connect to my database outside of Istio. So I created an egress for that. So once I started getting the hang of Istio and learning what I needed to do, I just appended those YAML files into this directory, and then of course I commit them and push them, and then the toolchain builds them and deploys them, and boom, I'm using Istio, and that's really nice, right? And that's what I like about it as a developer. I want things that speed me along. I don't want things that get in my way, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so those are the pre-built things that it built for me. And it's pretty good. I like that. Okay. Now here is the code that it generates. So I asked for a web service stub, and so it generated some stuff for me. And so the code that it generated is just a convention, and so you don't have to use it. I chose to. But this is the convention it's using. This is the example that it builds, and so all I did in front of that is I created I use this instead, right? And so this uses the JE micro profile that the Liberty application server actually makes use of. And so I can set my path for my REST microservices, and that's nice. And here it is. And so now here's the cute part. What I did in this project is I imported my RoboBank code. Okay, this is my 20-year-old, at least 20-year-old code. I dropped that. I just dropped that in here. And you know, we can argue about what makes a good microservice, and I'm not really here to do that today. But because you know, the idea is that it should be, if you're building containers, you're building microservices, it should be just, you know, one service per container, and that's cool. I'm good with that. For a start, what I decided to do was just, you know, dump all of my Java code from my old application into here and into practice, you know, working with microservices. So what I could do instead is I could actually, you know, do a RoboBank jar file, right? And then I would make that part of the Maven build, which this thing does. This thing does a Maven build to build out my Liberty application and throw it into a container. So we're not gonna discuss that today. This is what I did, and then you can work out however you want to do your microservices. But essentially, so I use my existing code, and then all I had to write, like I wrote this account engine microservice, and it's basically a wrapper to my code. So here's the path to provision my stuff. And so here's, if I want to get info on a customer, there's the microservice path. And then I start using my old code that I even these pieces I cut and paste from my old project. Because it was a JSP servlet engine, so I had some of this code in my servlets, and so I just cut and pasted out of my servlets and dumped it into my new REST calls. And it's like, wow, geez, that's okay. So I didn't have to do a lot of refactoring. It was more cutting and pasting and kind of troweling. so I didn't have to rebuild the house. I just had to trowel over some stuff, and that's good, because the idea here is that I don't want a microservice to take a million years if I want to migrate some code. And again, when you know, just because code is old, you know, the 20-year-old Java code that you have running, if it's good code, it deserves to live. Right, and so this is the new home for it, and that's the whole idea behind the migration story, and microservices, and really leveraging your Java applications, as opposed to, let's say, something that came before. So if I was writing stuff in COBOL, for example, you know, there are still systems running COBOL because we can't move that COBOL code anywhere. But those COBOL programs still, that code still provides a hell of a lot of value, a heck of a lot of value for a lot of people. So that's why it's still running today. But with the Java code, we have now a mechanism that we can actually, you know, really lift that code from where it was into where it is, or where it can be. And I like that. I like that as a developer. So that's pretty cool. So these are the microservices I generated. And then because I'm connected with my toolchain, if I make a change to my RoboBank, then there's my source code control system, and I just have to, you know, push, and it's commit. I'm still learning Git. So I commit, and then I push, and then as soon as I push, then the tool chain takes over. And that's the continuous integration, continuous deployment kind of stuff we're hearing about. That's it. So again, as a developer, I had to do next to nothing to make use of these services and to start making use of the cloud. So because I'm using the tool chains in the cloud, and that's kind of nice, and I don't have to think about it too much. And again, as a developer, I don't want to think. That's not exactly what I'm saying. I don't have to think about things that aren't development oriented. Okay, so you know, but what I can get away without thinking, you know, I'll take it. So anyway, so that's exactly you know, what I did. Right, so now you say, okay, well, that's nice. So really, that's what you did to do your microservices? And I say, yeah. Now again, I may have, you know, to the purist, I may have cheated a little bit here, because I'm actually providing multiple microservices through the same application. And so, you know, so again, we can debate whether that's a good practice or not. I think as a first cut of elevating myself to a person that does microservices, you know, I'm not gonna pick fleas on it. So there we go. That's my application. A simple wrapper, basically, to my existing Java libraries, using the microprofile and our tool chains. Okay. So I'm going to check out our tool chains here again. So if we go back to let's see, what's the default group, and we're going to we're going to look at those tool chains again, and just to see if it completed. So we'll let that do that. And so then, while it's thinking about this, we can talk about what the next step was. And the next step was, well, okay, what about the front end? You talked about, there we go. So there's the Robotest account. I'm going to click on my delivery pipeline, and that stage failed. So I can look through my logs. Oh, I know why. Because there is one tweak that you need to make in your thing. Oh, this is good. You think this might throw me, but no. I'm going to come back here. Oh, actually, why that didn't work. So let me just come back here. Okay, so I'm going to say okay. So I'm going to say okay. So I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to go. This is you think, hey Rob, I got you on something, but no, you didn't. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to use HTTPS. I'm going to copy that. Sometimes the tool chain, if it takes a little while to generate, the tool chain times out. So then I think I just come back here and I can say git clone that. And so I've already have my my stuff. My API keys and things like that, they're already set, so I didn't have to enter anything in. But there we go. So I've just pulled my code here. So if I directory, there's my test project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back. I'm going to my Visual Studio Code project that's in Robobop samples. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to my code, and I'm going to go like this. Let's go to the bottom here. Wait, pardon me. It's always when I'm trying to demo stuff. Okay, so I go here. And then to my workspace, I'm going to add a folder. So I'm going to add a folder to my workspace. I'm going to go to Robob, and I think what's called samples. Samples. I'm going to add that folder. Okay, and I'm going to say add. So that's going to go in there. There we go. So there is now the stub that I generated. And the one thing that I need to change is if I go to my scripts and I go to my kube deploy, I believe I say here. I do not want to do an upgrade, so I say yank put. I'm just going to do a helm and knit and not the upgrade. So now I'm going to make that change. Now, in case you're wondering, Rob, what editor are you using in Visual Studio? I am using VI because I'm an old guy and I still love using VI. So anyway, so I made my change to my helm thing, and then I go back here, and so now we'll see where to go. It should be in here somewhere. It's not RoboBank, it's RoboStage. There it is. And so I'm going to commit that. So I'm going to say tweaked what? Tweaked helm knit. Okay, and then I'm going to commit that, and then I'm going to push it. So now I've made a change to my project, and now I'm going to deploy it. So I'm pushing that in there. There it goes. And now if I go back to my tool chain, we'll go back here. Okay, and then we'll look at my delivery pipeline. We're going to see that the stage is running again because I made a change and it detected that. So now with the update to Helm, let's see how our deploy stage is going to work. So we're going to let that chew on that for a bit. In the meantime, I'm going to talk about my Node.js application. So with my Node.js application now, as I'll show you that, that's in Visual Studio as well, Visual Studio Code. I'm going to, there it is. There's RoboBank 2020 Web. It is a Node.js application. It has deployment scripts, the same as the previous one. So at this point, you can imagine that I went through exactly the same process to generate a JSON stub that I did using a microservice stub. And indeed, that's exactly what I did. I went to my command line and I said, generate me a JSON stub. And then it created a tool chain, and I'll show you the tool chain there. So this is still running. So we're going to go back to my tool chains. And we go back to here. Okay, and there is RoboBank 2020 Web, and I have a tool chain for that as well. And so now I have a tool chain to handle my JSON deployments, or my web app deployments, and I have a tool chain to handle my microservice deployments, pardon me. And so there we go. So I went through exactly the same process to generate my Node.js stub, and then I just dumped my Node.js code into that stub. So again, the scripts are generated for me. The deployment stuff is generated for me. Again, if I look here, I have my charts are here to deploy my application. So through Helm, the open source Helm, and I'm all set. And then I go and and then and then yada yada yada. I got a Node.js application. Well, of course, there's some development to do, right? So, but here you can see I'm using. If I go, here's my index.html for this project. There we go. And you see here in my code, I'm using Bootstrap, and I'm using jQuery, and I'm using all the and I'm using and in some of these things I'm even using some gauges that I get from somewhere else. And so I'm using the modern stuff. Okay, and that's really cool. And so let's go have a look at that application. So if I go here, this is Robobank 2020. And so now I'm making use of a couple of IBM services here, and then I'm going to talk about a bit more about those in part 2, but I want to show them off now because I'm going to use them. One of them is our App ID feature. So if I go here, and if I go to my dashboard, okay, I have something called, where'd it go? Here's a Robo App ID. All right, and so this is our application ID service, and what this is an OAuth provider as a service for you to use. And what we can do is we can maintain a user database here in IBM Cloud. We can do SAML federation. We have a cloud directory, so you could actually sorry, I forget where this is, but you could have people be able to log into your app through their Facebook ID, through their Google ID, through a local directory that you can create here, or through your own directory, your own on-prem directory. So IBM basically, you can basically farm out the authentication to IBM, and IBM will authenticate your web apps for you, which is really nice. And we provide code samples in Node.js and Java and in a couple other languages, so to get you started on how to use the app ID. And that's what I did. So if I go back here, let's see, where is this? Here's my modules for doing my microservices. Here's how I call my microservices, by the way. These are my operations. So there's a methodology to programming using the security framework, and we provide that sample in Node.js. Okay, and I'm just stalling because I can't remember where I put it. So here's so let me see. So the view engine. So there's the web app strategy. So and I'm just using what am I using for this? Again, I'm actually using some open source stuff to enforce security, and I'm using the OAuth provisioning from IBM. So that's how I integrate the security into my Node.js application. So I come back here and I log in. I get forwarded. You notice this? There's my OAuth thing, and there's the login page. So I'm going to log into that, and then there it is. And we're going to go through the architecture in a second, or we're going to actually in part 2. Pardon me. We're going to talk about how the operations side of this works, because again, I'm doing this and I'm calling microservices now. I'm not doing JDBC directly. My Node.js application is its own entity in Kubernetes, and it is calling my microservice engine, right? And so isn't this pretty? So here's the old one. Look at that. Now this was the bomb in 1997. This is 2020. This is using jQuery. This is using Bootstrap and things like that. And if I want to look at my account history, I just got to click on that. Oh, isn't that nice? That's pretty, isn't it? So this is a real career legacy demo application for me. I'm really quite pleased with it. So and then I'm gonna log out. So that's the application, and there it is. There's the architecture that we're going to talk about in part 2, and we're going to show how we're going to drive this architecture. All right, so did I talk about everything? I think I talked about everything about this application. So we're using the DevOps. Oh wait, let's go back to my tool chain. Sorry, I don't want. So that's the app ID. So I'm going to go back to my I'm going back to my DevOps tool chain, and I'm going to look at my my default resource group. Okay, there's my robotest. Let me look at my delivery pipeline now. I think I clicked on it. Yeah. So I'm going to look at my delivery pipeline. So this time, look, the deploy stage passed. Okay, so when I tweaked my script, and then my deploy stage passed. So let's go have a look at this thing now. So what's this application called? I called it RoboTest August 3rd. Let us go back to my container environment. Okay, so this is our container service through our integrated GUI. By the way, so all our IaaS and PaaS stuff is integrated now through the same GUI, which is really nice. There's my Toronto cluster, so I'm going to click on my Toronto cluster, and then let's look at the Kube dashboard. So this is really nice. I have not found its equal out there on the cloud. How nice the Kubernetes environment is to use in IBM Cloud. I really am impressed with it. Of course, we have the kube control command line, here's the kube proxy, which everybody understands. There's the deployment that happened 3 minutes ago. So again, it automatically deployed that to Kubernetes for me, and that application is available. And so I started with a stub, right? So I start with a stub, and poof, or bang zoom, call it whatever you like. It's in there, and then as I add more things into it, and I just continue to push those changes into the tool chain, into GitHub, the tool chain picks it up and builds it. So I can do this continuous integration and continuous deployment. All right. And so let me show you a tool chain that's a little more complex. It's not really complex. You can do some really interesting tool chains, and maybe I'll save a session on more complicated ones, but later on. I'm still learning them, by the way. So I'm just showing you stuff as I go along here. So we're going to go back to here, and we're going to look at my account engine tool chain, right? And so refresh that, because you notice here I have two data centers. I have the Toronto data center and I have the Montreal data center, right? And that and I want to be able to deploy to both of them, because and we're going to talk more about this in part 2, because I want a really fault tolerant system. Because let's pretend Robobank's a huge bank, and what banks, insurance companies, railways, airlines, and governments do is they have multiple data centers, and they have them in geographically dispersed parts of the country, and for good reason, because God forbid you lose a city. You want to be able to keep processing your vital transactions. So what I've done here is I set up 2 regional data centers, and I really want them to have their own control plane as well, because if I lose one, I don't want it to affect the control plane in the other. So I'm really happy to have 2 different Kubernetes clusters using, cloned with the same stuff. And look over here, I'm using Cloudflare, and we're going to get to that in part 2. I'm already jumping to part 2. So, but anyway, but I wanted to show you the tool chain that helps deploy this for me, because I don't want to have to worry about deploying to multiple clusters, right? I'd like my tool chains to do that for me. So that's exactly what this thing will do. So if I click on my account engine tool chain, you'll see I have a Toronto deploy and a Montreal deploy. So I can take the basic tool chain and I can add to it. And you notice here too is I've added a test stage. So if I want to run some test scripts in order for the whole build to be considered as successful, then I can add a testing stage as well. And again, in the future webcast, I'll get into that. Okay, but that's basically how the dev portion of the demo works. So if you want to stay tuned, I'm actually going to close this video out, and then you can click on the next video, and that's going to be part 2 of the modernization journey. So we've seen the dev part, right? So I've taken my 20-year-old app. That's what I did. I modernized it. And I transformed it. I changed my JSP application to a Node.js application. I changed my business logic to use microservices. I leveraged that code, right? So I didn't have to rewrite all my Java code. I leveraged it by putting a microservice front end on it, which is really nice. And then I used our tool chains to actually push that into a cloud-based environment without me having to worry about it. And that's really nice. That for me as a developer, I want something that's going to help me be productive. I don't want something that's going to slow me down. And that's exactly what this thing does. Good meat and potatoes kind of stuff. And I as a developer, well, I'm an IBMer, so I'm going to like our. I'm gonna make use of our stuff as much as possible. But as a developer, I think you can tell that that's the kind of stuff we're looking for, right? To make these things more straightforward. To use, make them help me use my ground-based IDEs if I still want to use them. Provide the cloud-based IDEs if I want to make use of those. That's fine, and then move on from there. All right. So thanks very much for watching. And please, if you want, please continue on to the second video. I think I'm going to change my shirt or something to make it look like it's a different day, but it's the same day. And thanks for watching. Take care now. Bye.